effective ways of talking to people in that situation is to talk about the risk factors involved and the vulnerable and how this will affect them. Okay? Be careful of human dignity arguments. Now, I know that might sound strange coming from me, a man who cares all about human dignity, but what I mean is when you engage with people who don't have a good grasp of philosophy or theology, so they don't even perhaps grasp what that term properly means, you're completely talking at odds. You're talking about human dignity, and you know you've got a very clear concept in your head. If you're a Catholic, you're going, okay, human dignity is found in the fact that we are made in the image and likeness of God, etc., etc. And we know what that is. For them, human dignity might mean a nice, easy life without suffering. And so you're talking about human dignity, and they're going, yeah, but that person hasn't got any human dignity. Because they're not seeing the frame of reference the same as you are. So be very careful.
And they're the same ones that tell you that you put down animals.
Yeah.
I get that all the time. I get the argument all the time, and where you shoot a dog, and then people start going into animals' souls, and they start getting upset about the animals. But it's crazy, and 15-year-old girls are the worst of it because. Yeah. But that's why I get the argument, like you do it to a dog, so. You know.
And that's what I often say. Because remember Leslie Martin, To Die Like a Dog was the title of her book, and I was like, but why are we seeing this? That's the whole point. They're not animals. The reason that I talked to the class yesterday, didn't I? So we make this distinction. You don't even need to do a philosophy class to understand this. If you came home tonight and found that your next door neighbour's dog had broken into your house and had destroyed up your couch, ripped it up, and was chewing on your slippers, what's the first thing you do? You wouldn't call the police and expect the dog to be arrested and charged with breaking and entering and then go to court and possibly face a jail sentence. And if it's a Catholic dog, it should go to confession, of course. We don't, because the dog didn't sit outside your house and go, I'm so morally conflicted, what would dog Jesus do? Should I break in or not? There is no personhood there, and so it doesn't, it's not the same thing. We don't even need a philosophy degree to understand that you don't charge. However, if you came home and found your next door neighbour had done that, and he's sitting there on your couch chewing on your slippers, and he's broken into your house and ripped up your cushions, and let's say he's not mentally unstable, he just doesn't like you, right? You would expect that the police could be involved, that he might face a court sentence and time before a judge and possibly jail, and hopefully he would repent and redeem himself, right? Why? Because he's not an animal. That's the whole point. And that was the thing I never understood. Well, I do understand why it happens, but I never understood why people fell so easily into that whole notion of because there's lots of things. Paul Russell's really good on this one. He had this list of things that we do differently to animals that you would never do to a human being. He's like, okay, well, should we lock grandma up outside, put a collar on her and tie her up outside overnight then? Because we do that to dogs as well as putting them down. So if putting people down like we do to dogs is okay, then why is it not okay to get grandma a collar and chain her up outside with a blanket and a basket? Because she's a human person. But you're right, this whole thing...
People get crazy over animals and, you teach teenage girls and that's their heart. If you tell them that the animals only have souls and let's save the whales and get the unborn babies. But it's true, they've got this really... It's out of balance in terms of, they'll stand up and do safe, and be a part of safe. But, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge contradiction. I saw an advert from PETA just the other day that's doing the rounds, their latest one from PETA out of India. And they've got someone cooking up bacon and eggs and having milk for breakfast. And as they cook up the eggs and there's all these screaming chickens, and then they cook up the bacon and there's these screaming pigs, and I'm thinking, it smells so good, the sweet sound of murder. It never tastes, looks so good. And then they've got someone pouring a glass of milk and these cows screaming in agony. And the advert ends with this statement about, the evils of this breakfast that you've just consumed, bacon, eggs and milk. And I'm thinking, what's wrong? This has just come out of India. And I'm thinking, even in India, India, Al-Qaeda has just made a move into India. They're trying to open a franchise, literally, in India. And this is what's coming out of India. There's no concept of ISIS just around the corner as beheading human beings. I would have thought that might be a more pressing issue, but you're right. I heard someone interesting suggest that perhaps, one part of it is the desensitisation process that goes on. I saw a study just recently. It was absolutely astounding. Someone has tracked the average numbers of murders in video games, TV, and movies that your average young person now sees over a 1 year, 5 year, and 10 year period. And it's astounding. It's in the tens of thousands. Now, when you see even fictionalised human death, constant like that, there's a desensitisation goes on. Death of humans, normal, because I see it all the time. We don't watch the death of animals a lot. So when that, you're confronted with that, that's horrible, because and I thought it's an interesting point there, I think, that we don't, there's a desensitisation that's gone on to that. So we mix up the gravity. Challenge the right to die position. This is important. And I often challenge this. People say, well, don't you respect my right to die? And so I don't think there's any such thing as the right to die. So what do you mean? I think there's a right to refuse burdensome treatment, and there's a right to allow nature to take its course. So if a doctor says, we want to hook you up to a machine and keep you going for another 20 years, and you really know that this is going to be literally an existence of say someone in their 80s, and they have a serious illness, like terminal illness, and this would just be for them a very painful and degrading 20 years, it's quite acceptable ethically to say, no, that's extraordinary, that's burdensome, I want nature to take its course. And so you have a right to do that, but there's no such thing as the right to die. What we're really talking about, you can't really ask for the right to die. It's kind of like asking for the right to get old, or the right to age, or to develop. It's going to happen whether you want it to or not. So it's kind of odd to claim something that is going to happen whether you want it to or not as a human right, because it implies that it might not happen. I'm exercising my right not to die, I'm just going to live forever. It doesn't happen like that, right? Now, the other thing I often like to challenge people with is I would say to them, okay, so let's play this argument out a little bit. So you believe there's a right to die, and you support legalised euthanasia. Oh, yes, I do, Brendan. Okay then. So, do you think anybody, what about a 16-year-old who wants to kill themselves, do you think they should exercise their right to die? Oh, no, not 16-year-olds. Just people who are at the end stage of their life, who've got terminal illness, are definitely going to die, and we can't do anything about it. Those people. We should legalise it for them. And I say, hold on a minute, you've just told me something that's contradictory now, because you just said this is a human right. So if it's a genuine human right, then how can you restrict that right to only a certain group of people and say only they're allowed to exercise that human right and other people are not, like 16-year-olds, or people who are not ill? If it's a genuine human right, you have to say everyone can kill themselves anytime they want to. Now what happens at that point is one of two things that work in your favour. Number one is, they either admit, hopefully in front of a group of people, that they hold a really extreme ideology and say, yeah, okay, I think suicide is an act of personal autonomy you should be able to do any time. And at that point, most people, even pro-euthanasia, go, ooh, take a step back, don't make eye contact and let's get out of here. They start to panic, because this is not what most people are buying into. Most people are buying into misguided notions about pain management and what they think, they think they're being merciful and ending someone's suffering. Or, all of a sudden they go, click, oh yeah, how can this be a human right if only some people are going to get access to it and we're going to deny it to other people? And they start to realise that there's an absurdity in this claim that you have a right to suicide, because that's what they're asking for as a human right. Okay. What's your terminology? And this was something really interesting for me. I found out a couple of years ago. Some market research that was done in Australia by an anti-euthanasia group, and they took got a market research company, and they took an average group of the population from different sectors, people who had no. People who were supportive of the position, but a wide spectrum of views, and they did market research with them to find out how best to frame the arguments and how best to talk to the culture about the issue. What they found was interesting. They found that the majority of people did not know what the word or the term palliative care meant. They didn't know. And when I found that out, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been using this in the media, in interviews, about this issue. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, most people don't even know what I'm saying. So the same is true when you're discussing this with other people. We talk about palliative care all the time, end-of-life care. I now use the term end-of-life care rather than palliative care, because even hospice care, some people still don't get their head around what that actually means. And the other thing that was interesting was they asked people, what do you think are fair and non-emotive descriptions of euthanasia? And they said, well, calling it murder was not acceptable. But I was really surprised. The majority of them said they felt that lethal injection was a fair description. So I've been using that terminology ever since. So I think it's pretty straight to the point, it's pretty stark. Doctors giving people lethal injections, they said they thought that was a fair description of euthanasia. But calling it murder, they said that was too much hyperbole. So, interesting, eh? So terminology does matter in this debate, and it's important to be careful of that. Challenge the grave contradiction. We've talked about the anti-suicide contradiction. Challenge people on that. Do you oppose youth suicide? Yes. Well, how can you oppose youth suicide? On what grounds, legitimately, can you oppose a young person ending their life, but not a person who's elderly and just decides their life has no value? How come you don't support, you support them at one end of life ending their lives, but at the other end you say, no, it's not acceptable. Get them to see the grave contradiction. Explain the threat to the vulnerable. I think that's really important, getting people to see, and I'm talking here about elderly persons with disabilities, low-income people who are often very much at the mercy of the system, people who are isolated and don't have good advocacy that can go into bat for them. Like if you're an elderly person who perhaps is living away from family, your rest of your family has passed on, and you don't have someone to act as an advocate for you as you travel through the health system. I think exploring the issue of good pain management is really important as well. and this is a matter of saying to people, look, the answer to people in these situations, in these difficult situations, is good end-of-life care, or good therapeutic care. It is not a quick and speedy death at the end of a lethal injection. And the pain management experts tell us that there are now, because of the way technology has advanced, there are practically no situations now, they're so rare they consider them non-existent, where you can't adequately treat and manage pain for a patient. And they still happen, but most of the time it's because of a lack of resourcing or a lack of knowledge, or these situations, they're very rare cases, but the doctors who are experts in the field suggest that they're actually so rare that the idea that that say 30% of people who get cancer die terrible painful deaths is simply not true. If that's happening, you've got a problem with a lack of training and resourcing, not with pain management itself. The other thing about pain management, I think is quite important to... what was the other thing I was going to say about pain management? Oh, you remember on my video, I mentioned how increasing a patient's pain medication, even if that hastens their death, is actually ethical. The principle of double effect. You're not intending their death, you're not doing anything to kill them, you're incrementally increasing their pain meds, and even if that speeds up the process of dying, that's not the intention, and the drugs are not being administered for that purpose. That is ethically acceptable. Now, I was speaking recently to Sinead Donnelly, who's a doctor based out of Wellington, very great Irish woman, and she's a real expert in these areas, and she said to me, look, pain management's changed now. Since you made that video, it's got even better. Basically now they can use, there's new drugs available to them where they can increase the dose and it doesn't hasten the death. So they can increase the dose to treat the pain, but they don't have the issue of hastening death now like they used to. So you see how interesting, how fast this changes. You have someone like John Key who gets in the media last year and makes a complete hash of this issue by suggesting a confusing pain management with euthanasia, and suggesting that people are dying in pain and that lots of doctors and nurses are just ending the life of their patients in New Zealand, because he completely confused what euthanasia was and he had no good grasp. A friend of mine who's a doctor went and met with him and he said, I've put him straight now. but yeah, this is what happens when people don't understand the issue, and sadly this is so much of what drives people is not just the fear I talked about before, but the ignorance of what they're actually talking about. So they don't understand the terminology properly. They think, when you say euthanasia, they think you're saying that we should outlaw pain relief, even if it might have that impact of hastening a person's death, or that we should leave a patient in terrible pain and suffering to die because they don't understand the treatments that are available. So
are there any good resources and video clips that give us the latest information?
Yes, I can give you, what I can do is I can put you in touch with Paul Russell again. Now Paul Russell has got contacts he works with all around the world, and there's some people he works with who are pain management specialists, and he's got various papers and other things. There's a really good book, I haven't brought it with me. There's a very good little book that's just been published recently by a guy out of Canada, Alex Shardenberg, and it's just literally, it's a pretty dry read. In fact, it's not a huge book, but it's a volume of all the latest research around euthanasia, and it's a good little read. I wish I brought it with me. I must have it back home, but let me just, no, I can't find it. So it's a good little volume of a collection of all the latest research about things like pain management, about the risks to people, what happens to other family members, what's going on in the Netherlands. It's good. I'll try and find the title, and if I email you guys, would that be the best way to get it to you, disseminate it to you? Yeah, okay, let's do that. Okay. Now that's me, I think, yes. Yes.
I applaud what you're doing, but I'm afraid I could end up being rather negative. But, for instance, have you considered talking to great power meetings?
Yes. Now, please understand my involvement in this. I am working with a group behind the scenes that is a lot more active than I am, because I've got a lot of demands on my time and what I engage with. I've been working closely with a group that's quite well organised and goes to quite high levels. So we're talking, medical experts and others who have set up a network around the country and are working on those very schemes of engaging with, trying to bring, and they have effectively brought some of the disability sector on board already. Maggie Barry, obviously, as some of you will be aware, has basically put her name to a coalition to speak out against legalised euthanasia. So this group has been responsible for driving a lot of that stuff behind the scenes. So there's some really good things like that definitely happening. Now that's not something I do simply because of the time constraints on me as a young father and a man who's busy doing other things as well in this arena. So
I'll give you an example of how negative I can be.
Yeah, far away.
You're wasting your time talking to Catholics.
Yep. No, that's good. That's a fair complaint. Yep.
You'd be better off
Yeah.
You'd be better off going to the likes of Great Power and even the other churches.
Yeah.
How many thousands, tens of thousands of Catholics do you have in Auckland that go to Mass every Sunday? They couldn't care a continental. Otherwise, you'd have been having St Patrick's Cathedral and giving this talk there because there were so many interested Catholics.
I would take a more hopeful, optimistic view. That,
and I'll tell you another thing.
I don't know, let me take my optimistic view first, then you can tell me another thing. So I would take an optimistic view that I believe, because I still see the fruit of even an engagement like this and equipping people to go out, and you just don't know the fruit of what can, the knock-on, the flow-on from this. I'd also say in the background there is the same network I just talked to you about, has been working, and they are working with the New Zealand bishops, and there is actually a coordinated program which has been hugely effective, a lobbying campaign, which was used in Australia in 2 different territories where they tried to legalise it, and popular opinion was hugely supportive of legalising it. And because of this campaign, lobbying campaign driven by Catholics primarily, but other Christians joined in as well over in Australia, both pieces of legislation were reversed and they didn't succeed. Now that same concept, it's got the go-ahead, it's all ready to go, roll out once the bill goes back into the ballot and is drawn and becomes an issue, then this will be kicked into gear. So there is work being done within the Catholic Church behind the scenes about that. And I think you're right about who to talk to, and this is a constant reminder for all of us on any issue. There is a continuum of views, if you like, and at one end we'll put the Catholics just for the sake of argument, and we could say anybody who's anti-euthanasia is in this group here. They're a sort of small group at this end. There's an even smaller group at this end who are your die-hard euthanasia activists, who are they're a smaller group, but they are still out there and they're very vocal. The group we've got to reach is this big group in the middle here, who could go either way on this issue. So I think you're right. There's certainly a need to get out and reach. But if we don't equip these people to do it, then I can't do everything on my own. But anyway, carry on. What was the next one?
I can understand you perhaps being upset from the statement I just made, but this sort of thing, Catholic Truth Society, okay, 1950 they had a film in America where they were suggesting that they would come when you could only have one child, and if you had 2, well then if they caught the pregnancy early enough they would abort it, the second child. If it was too late, they would put you in a prison hospital, the baby would be born, and then it would be killed. So this pamphlet was printed in 1973. That film was made in America in 1950. This was put out by Father Moore, SJ. This bedraggled paperback was printed about 1975. Looking at the age of you, I would say you were all too young to remember the great conference that was held in Wairaki in 1975 when it was going through Parliament that they had the Abortion Contraceptive Act, and they had some of these guys that were there and gave the lectures were the top people in the world, okay? They sent a couple of them down to Parliament at that time, but Parliament just rejected them. In fact, they accused them, the church, of a set-up, but those speakers were all ordered 12 months ahead, and it was a coincidence that Parliament was discussing the Abortion Contraceptive Act. Also, I only know of 2 doctors, Catholic doctors, that won't prescribe the pill. So all the other Catholic doctors do it.
There's a lot more than that.
Okay.
Yeah, I know of a lot more than that. Yes.
But it really, I'm well into my 86th year, and I'm getting concerned about my concern of the ignorance of Catholics in particular. Okay? I'll throw a couple of little points at you. Jesus Christ is the figure that the hierarchy bandy on about.
It's quite important though.
Now, who gave us Homo sapiens the faculty of sex? Who would you expect to be the greatest teachers of sex? I would have thought it should have been the Catholic hierarchy, seen as their founder gave us that faculty in the first place. Okay? Second one I'll throw at you is, what relationship do you see between contraceptive mentality and the lack of infrastructure in your country? I've been putting that to a number of people of late, even in the deputy mayor, and he had to ask me, what did I just say? And I thought, man, you're either half flaming deaf or you're that thick, you don't understand the question. The answer is quite simple. Contraception mentality is based around zero population. So, the opposite to that is that if you're expecting the population to rise, you have people who are planners, forward thinkers. Okay? Think of your hydro stations, electric power. Way back 70 odd years ago, we didn't need those size power stations 70 years ago. There was only about 1.25 million of us at that time. Now there's about 4.5 million. They were forward thinkers. They didn't have contraceptive in their mind and zero population growth. And this is what's annoying me, is why our bishops, for instance, way back in this time, 1975, why they didn't put it around that at least all the Catholic schools would have a copy in their library, and they'd be campaigning people on Sunday to have this in their home. It even tells you at that time what the size of the world was, how much land was covered by houses, factories. At the time, there was only 3% of arable land, that's good productive land,